So far, I've finished much of the platformer game I'm working on, but one aspect I haven't touched is the sound design. So recently, that's what I've tried to get started on. Part of the reason I've delayed it for so long is just because I have practically zero experience making sounds, compared to the years I have making graphics and programming. This game also just has a lot of strange enemies, which meant I had to find interesting ways to get the kinds of sounds I'm looking for. As an example, the eye stalk appears to be a giant eyeball on a stem. It shoots at the player and generally is quite a nuisance. Since it's primarily an eyeball, I wanted to emphasize its wetness to make it seem more realistic and gross. It's not obvious what the best way to do this is, but I soon decided to try squishing tomatoes, since they're kind of filled with tomato water or something. I think it sounds fairly good, though it can be creatively exhausting to find good solutions like this. The next enemy is the deformed bird. I like to imagine that it's on its last bit of life, so I thought it would be pretty funny to use this sound for its jump, since it sounds like its bones are cracking every time it moves. This sound is actually from opening a plastic bottle for the first time. You know, when the tabs holding the cap on are snapped off. I didn't expect to use the sound here, but I thought it actually fit pretty well, so I decided to keep it. The final enemy we'll look at is the guarded bug. This is actually a new enemy that we'll definitely return to later, but for now I just wanted to make a sound for its wings flapping. This one was actually surprisingly easy. I just took a tissue and flapped it around in the air. It's not very sophisticated, but I suppose it doesn't need to be. I'm still missing a lot of sounds, like for the rest of the enemies, but part of it is just being able to record the sounds I want. For example, I'd like to record a bonfire to represent the ghost, but I have yet to build a bonfire. This makes creating sounds different to creating graphics, since I actually have to go out into the world, even if that just means away from my desk. I also made sound effects for the player, but since the player has much more of them, I won't go into as much detail. Basically, there's a few step sound effects which I recorded by walking. The attack sound effect is from whipping a belt around like an idiot, and the damage sound is from me doing what I can only describe as coughing without breathing out, pitched up a lot. I particularly like the damage sound because it catches your attention, but isn't too shrill. Overall, I made a lot of good progress here, and I enjoyed the unique experience of finding different ways to create interesting sounds. It was a sort of playful escape from the dedication to art and game design that I often take too seriously. I didn't just work on sounds, however. I also added a whole new area, and as mentioned before, a new enemy. The new area is essentially a downward hallway filled with spikes and eye stalks. It isn't too different from sections earlier in the level, but I really like it because it's very fast-paced due to the quick downward transitions, and requires a lot of precision to avoid the various forms of damage. Because of my work on this new area, I actually changed some mechanics in the broader game. First, the camera now locks much quicker, which admittedly looks less elegant, but it ensures you have more time to react to the obstacles in a room. I also made the eye stalks shoot much faster, making them more difficult to dodge. One side effect of this is that I also had to change an earlier room, which would otherwise be too difficult to complete. One seemingly minor change is that you can now change directions mid-attack, which prevents this awful situation where you attack right before you switch directions, causing you to miss an enemy. This makes the controls feel much more responsive, which is obviously important. After the downward section, you'll reach an area that's very unfinished, but this is where I plan to introduce the guarded bug. It hovers in place, shooting at the player, and is also guarded by 3 additional projectiles. This means that the player has to dodge multiple projectiles to reach the bug, which makes the encounter more engaging. In the future, just after this part, I'd like to add a very difficult section that makes use of many enemies previously introduced. Lately, I've been more comfortable making specific areas more difficult, since I can place checkpoints in strategic places to make the challenge less frustrating. In general, I'm quite happy with the direction this game is taking, and I'm looking forward to see it become more complete. If you enjoyed this devlog, consider checking out the previous one to see how I initially designed the deformed bird, and consider subscribing to stay up to date on the newest uploads. Thank you. Bye.